This dress is my favorite summer make by far, and the fabric is wildly luxurious, a gorgeous silk charmeuse from Rex Fabrics. The pattern I'm sewing today is the Marcel dress by Chalk & Notch. There are 3 views, including a tank version, as well as 2 lengths for adding tiers. I have sewn view A today, and since I'm only 5'0", the midi length is a perfect maxi for me. In this video, I use a turning tool for the straps. They come in a set of 3 sizes and turn thin straps in seconds. I'll link them below. Get ready to sew a gorgeous tiered summer garment. Let's get started. I've applied interfacing to the wrong sides of both of my strap pieces. Now I'm going to fold them in half right sides together and pin the long edges. Then sew the long raw edges together for both of those straps with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then press those seam allowances open for both straps so that the seam is centered down the middle. Then we can turn these straps right side out . Press them once more, then you can set these straps aside. I've applied interfacing to the wrong sides of my bodice main pieces as well as their corresponding bodice facing pieces. Now I'm going to place the front and back bodice pieces right sides together and pin the side seams. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. And repeat for the interfaced facing pieces. Now for the bodice facing, I'm going to press the raw bottom edge to the wrong side all the way around by 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to place each of my straps right sides together with the main bodice piece so that the seam of each of the straps is facing me. Center them at each of those strap placement points and pin in place. Then we'll base them in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that those straps are attached to the front bodice piece, without twisting the strap, fold it in half so that the right side of the strap also faces the back bodice piece. Place it right sides together in between the notches at the top of the back bodice piece and pin in place. Doing this for both straps. And then baste those straps in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance just as we did for the front. Now you can try on this main bodice piece to make sure that the straps fit the way you like and undo the basting and make adjustments if necessary. Once you're happy with the fit of the main bodice piece, turn the straps downward once again and place the bodice facing right sides together with the main bodice and pin them together all around the top edge. Once you have that pinned all the way around, we're going to sew all around the top of the front and back edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now that the front, main, and facing pieces are attached all around the upper edges, we're going to understitch. Open out the main and facing pieces away from each other. And with that seam allowance pressed toward the facing, we're going to sew the facing to the seam allowance all the way around, using about 1/8 inch seam allowance. For the front side of the garment, as you're understitching, your presser foot won't allow you to sew all the way around those front straps, so you can start and stop your stitching on either side of the strap. Now that that's understitched, turn the facing to the inside and then give those neckline edges a good press. Here is one of my side panel tier 2 pieces. I'm going to sew basting stitches all the way around that top edge, the edge with a single notch. I'm going to use the longest stitch on my machine with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving thread tails at both ends so that I have threads to pull for gathering. Now I'll place the bottom edge of my Tier 1 piece right sides together with the top basted edge of the Tier 2 piece, matching the center notches and pin in place. Now I'll pull those basting stitches so that the Tier 2 piece fits the bottom of the Tier 1 piece. Once it fits and the gathers are distributed evenly, pin in place, doing this on both sides. I'll repeat all of those steps for the corresponding Tier 1 and Tier 2 pieces. Sew these pieces together with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and then press the seam up toward Tier 1. Here is my Tier 3 piece, and I've gone ahead and basted the top edge just as I did for the top of the Tier 2 piece. Now I'll place that basted edge right sides together with the bottom of the Tier 2 piece, matching the notches, pulling the basting stitches, and pinning in place. Then we can sew together with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and repeat to attach your opposite Tier 3 piece to the opposite Tier 2 piece. And once again, you can press that seam upward toward Tier 2. Then we can repeat all those steps in the exact same way to attach Tiers 4 and Tier 5. Here is one of my center front panels, and I'm going to start attaching the side panels. I'm going to place one of my side panels right sides together with the center front, starting by matching up the single notches toward the top of the fabrics. And then I'll continue matching the notches as I make my way down. Each notch will match up with the seams of the tiers. Then I'll repeat to pin the opposite side panel to the opposite side of the center front panel. Once again, right sides together, matching the notches. Sew from the top to the bottom on both sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish those seams, and press them toward the center front panel. Here is my center back panel, and we're going to attach it to the garment in the same way as we did for the center front panel, pinning both of the side panels at each of their corresponding side seams, placing them right sides together, matching the notches, and pinning from top to bottom. And doing this to attach both side panels to both sides of the center back panel. Then we can sew from top to the bottom of the dress with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and press them toward the center back panel just as we did for the front pieces. Now all of the panels are connected, and it's time to attach the bodice. To prepare the center back and center front panels for being attached to the bodice, we're going to sew basting stitches along the tops of both respective panels. From one side of the center back to the other side of the center back, I'm going to sew basting stitches with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving thread tails on both ends. I'll do the same to sew basting stitches from one side to the other for the center front panel. Now that those sections are basted, I'll place the main bodice piece right sides together with the top of the dress, matching the raw edges. I'll match up the notches that correspond with each of the side panels and pin in place, doing this on both sides. Then I can start pulling the basting stitches for the front and back panels to fit the bodice on both sides. Once it fits and the gathers are distributed evenly, pin in place. Then we'll sew the bodice main to the top of all of our panels with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure that the bodice facing is out of the way. Here is the wrong side of my main dress, and I've gone ahead and pressed those bodice seam allowances up toward the bodice. Now I'm going to take the facing and fold it to the inside of the dress so that the bottom edge of the facing that we pressed earlier is still pressed under. And we'll place that pressed edge over the seam so that it just covers the stitching line and pin in place all the way around. And I'm going to be pinning from the outside of the dress. Now that I have that pinned all around the outside, and the pins are catching the inner fold of the facing on the inside, I'm going to stitch in the ditch of the outside seam all the way around. Now along the bottom of the dress, we're going to complete the hem. At this point, you can try on the dress to determine how deep of a hem you'd like to create. The pattern instructions have you folding the raw edge to the wrong side by 1/4 of an inch and then rolling that hem on top of itself by another 1/4 of an inch and pressing in place. I've gone ahead and pressed the raw edges all along the bottom to the wrong side by 1 inch. Then I'm going to press the raw edge to the crease and then on the crease and press in place all the way around. And I'm going to edge stitch close to that inner fold all the way around. And now your dress is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. I sewed the size 0 today, and besides the 1-inch hem at the bottom of the dress, I made no changes to the pattern. Subscribe for more full-length sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.